BREWtally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. For over 30 years, Rockabilia has been the go-to destination for all things band merch. With over 500,000 items in their online store and collaborations with today's hottest bands, you're sure to find something you love. Use our code BREW10 at checkout and take 10% off your total order. So go pick up your favorite new piece of merch now over at Rockabilia.com. And now, on to the show.
Say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Dwid of Integrity. Holy fucking shit. Wow. This was one, if I'm being completely honest, sitting here recording this right now, still in disbelief that it happened. I still can't believe how it happened, and is just another reminder that life sometimes will present itself in ways that are pretty interesting, and as long as you are paying attention and are ready for the moment and the opportunity, then sometimes really cool shit happens. And this is one of those that a few weeks ago I put out the episode with Brandon Chae from Bleeding Through, and I get a notification that the Integrity band page on Instagram reshared the episode, and was not expecting that. And then the weirder thing is, like, right when that happened, I had just been looking at Twitter or X, whatever, I'm still calling it Twitter. But I was on there and I saw that the Hardlore guys basically had posted like the next 3 guests that they were recording over the next week or so. And Dwid was one of them. And I was sitting there going like, oh man, that's going to be such a great episode. So much to unpack with that dude. And boom, there's the notification that Integrity shared that episode. And blew me away. I kind of took the moment to thank them for sharing it, and then basically, in my infinite wisdom, was like, I'm gonna reshare it, and then basically just be like, because I wasn't sure who was running the page. I was pretty sure it was Dwid, but I'm not sure. So I was like, hey, open invite to whoever wants to come on, if they would like to come on the show. And to my surprise, I got another DM pretty fucking quickly that was like, yep, I would be interested, would love to come on the show. Here's some dates and times. Basically, I'm recording an episode of Hardlore. I could be available the next day. And talk about pressure, man. I really look up to what Bo and Colin do over there at the Hardlore. I listen all the time. I think it is the perfect mix of humor, of historians, of people that are in the scene and have long been in the scene and just kind of want to be curating everything from new bands to old bands and everything in between. I think what that show does is so great. So to follow up a day later after doing an episode with those guys was a little bit of a daunting task, because I don't think I really do that. I do something a little differently. I think I do, if I'm being honest, I like to do something I think that's a little more cerebral in the approach. And I mean, if I'm being completely honest, if you listen to Integrity, or more to the point, if you've ever listened to Dwid do other interviews, see his own stuff, you know that the dude is intense and very, very intentional with a lot of his stuff. So I was very excited to do this conversation, but I also was felt a little like maybe I had jumped into the deep end, and could I swim? Could I do it? And I'm definitely going to say, after the episode with John from Warbringer, I was a little nervous about putting that one out, because some of the things we discussed and kind of being a little more transparent with a lot of my more world political views and so forth. There were times during this chat that I was a little unsure how much of me I wanted to put into this. And it's honestly something I'm trying to do a lot more, not just in this show, but in my own life, is just to be not afraid to be me. If I have questions, if I question something, to kind of put it out there, to kind of have discussions with people, and to kind of hopefully grow from the experience. And that was really what I wanted to do with this conversation with Dwid. There are topics that I brought up, questions I had been thinking about, and I didn't know how they were going to go over, but I'm so thankful that I didn't let the fear of this conversation deter me from having kind of a breakthrough in a few different capacities afterward. And honestly, getting to know Dwid in the DMs and through doing this conversation pre and post has been really great. And also, you know what? Fuck it. I don't want to talk anymore. Let's get into my conversation with Dwid, and I'll talk to you on the other side of it. So I gotta say, it's a little daunting on my end. I know like hard lore exists. I listen to it pretty regularly, and I think it stacks up there for me. Where I remember having Dez from X Cold Chamber, I guess still Cold Chamber now, but we were doing a chat and I kept getting put on hold and pushed back because he was on the line with Forbes, and I was like, I don't know where I rank compared to Forbes, but. I feel the same way. I know that Hard Lore has done a really great job of having people like yourself and so many other great guests on. And it's a little daunting because I think they do a really great thing with what they do, but I do an entirely different kind of more stream of conscious type thing. Good, bad, or indifferent. So I'm very excited to talk with you today and kind of pick your brain about some stuff.
Yeah, great. I mean, every conversation should be different, shouldn't it?
Absolutely.
If it was all the same, it'd be redundant and boring. And
well, I mean, that's a really great segue right into something I was thinking about today, and probably something I would imagine you've been asked quite a bit is just, does it shock you? We're in 2025, and I think you can kind of replace the year at any point in the last probably decade or so, but that things that you were motivated, upset by, whatever, to talk about back in the early 90s is still as relevant now as it ever has been.
Yeah, I guess I'm not shocked. I think that the end of the world is always coming. It's always here and always coming, and it's just the way you perceive it and how you process it in your own mind. So it seems somehow that they always figure a way to weasel out of a total extermination of the human race. But I'm hoping that at least sometime they're gonna not be able to save the human race. It will all be extinct. That'd be fantastic. But
it's kind of interesting. I don't know how much into movies you are and stuff like that, but I would imagine you take in a lot of different forms of entertainment.
Yeah, I'm a big movie fan.
So a big thing that caught me, I was coming back from a trip with my wife in Vegas, and I ended up watching Midsommar. And I've only seen it once, but I think the way I watched it was the perfect way to really take that movie in on a laptop, noise canceling headphones. I'm just looking at this, 18-inch screen, just really immersed in this world. And one of the things that really stood out to me was, and spoilers if you haven't, anyone who hasn't seen it, but within the first couple of minutes of the movie, essentially they go to this, you'll find out, as a cult. And one of the things that this cult does is, I think it's either 62 or 65. That's it. You're done. You go to this cliff, you jump off. It's a big ceremony, a celebration of life of sorts, and that's it. And when your end is, you get to live your life pretty accordingly. You get to go out, hopefully lauded by your community and so forth. And there was something about it where I was like, I kind of feel I feel like there's something there. I feel like that's I don't know if admirable would be the word I use, but I think there's something very beautiful in that, like knowing the finality of your life and getting to live your life accordingly to that. And then subsequently just really been thinking about how it's kind of sad that we show more humanity to animals, when they're suffering and they're going through things, the humane thing to do is to put them down. And we don't have that same compassion, I think, with our other loved ones and so forth, because of the only thing I've come up with is that it's some reflection of us not being able to let go, because we're selfish as people. But that's something I've been thinking a lot about in the last handful of years since watching that movie for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that could be said about that. I assume you're talking from an American perspective, or
Yeah, I guess because
because
the
In
movie.
Belgium we have euthanasia. You can apply for it and get it. It's not a taboo. It's normal.
What out of curiosity, without cutting off, what is the process like for that? Is it like getting a license for anything else? I would assume.
Not a license. You just basically need to prove that it's something that you really want. It's not that you're a teenager who's
Mm,
broke up with someone and then you make that decision. It has to be for a valid reason, and the doctor has to approve it. So you go through to a psychologist, a psychiatrist, then they take you to the next step to a doctor. Once it's been approved that you're not going to regret your decision, or that you don't have some kind of a depression or a mental problem that could be cured if you're doing it of sound mind, and oftentimes not sound body. That would be the reason by most
mm.
people's case. If you have terminal cancer or something like that, or something that's really deterring your life in a painful way.
It's interesting. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Were you? Was that
I was
it?
just going to say that
Oh,
this a few months ago, my wife's grandmother applied, and was granted this, and
mm,
she went through that procedure. It was very interesting, because her other grandmother had passed a couple of years prior, but she passed in a natural way. We knew that she was older. We knew that she wasn't doing well, but you weren't sure when the day was coming, and then the day came. But with this grandmother, she had it all planned out. She made appointments with everyone in the family to discuss why, and tell them everything that she felt about them, her love, and everything. And then one day, she went to her appointment, and that was it.
mm.
It was my first time experiencing that, and it's a different kind of mourning, I guess.
Um, this is kind of sort of what I was saying to you, or actually in the email I had sent and setting this up. This is kind of why I like having these conversations, because I just kind of like learning about people and different cultures and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
something that you don't know about me, but is death has been a pretty prevalent part of my life since being born. Like I had a brother born on the same day, 2 years apart. I was the older brother. I had a bunch of birth defects and stuff, and I was not supposed to live. I clearly am here. He did not and is not. And it's a thing where between a lot of friends and family just kind of passing away over my life and going to therapy a few years ago, it's weird to have someone tell you like you understand that death is a thing and it's going to happen, and that a lot of people that you probably encounter don't have that same understanding. Like they kind of push it away, and it's not something they wrestle with at all or have this understanding of like that. So when I hear you say, going through the stages of mourning and stuff like that, I almost feel like it's more advantageous for the stages of grief and mourning and all that, because it's coming. You get to kind of experience and go through it with this person versus it just happening and then having to, at least I'll say here in America, because that's my only experience, where it's almost an inconvenience. It's an inconvenience for your job to have to take time off, and only if it's allotted in the deemed appropriate people like your mom or your parents, your grandparents, and maybe your siblings or wife, that those are acceptable to. You just get to have like the time off for free, essentially, versus, well, you would have to ask for the time off and we may or may not give it to you. So there's all of those kind of things where it just feels like it's never done in a way that I think it should be. And I guess grieving and grief and processing death and all that never is. But how was that experience for you? Do you think it is better for everyone involved going through it that way?
Oh, I don't know if it's better. It's different.
Hmm.
Her problem was she had some severe pain in her back. She had some spine problems, but she was very, very in charge of her faculties. She had a lot of wit, and she was smart, and she would continue to read books. and she had no loss of her faculties in any way, shape, or form, but it was a physically painful thing for her. And her husband had died many years ago, and I think it was something more like she was a Christian woman, so in her world, she would be awakening in heaven with her loved ones. So that's her perspective on it. So yeah, for the family, it was awkward because I think that was the first person in their family who went through that, and it's different.
It's just one of those that, like I said, we don't really culturally think of others or other, like we're so enamored, I guess, with how things are done here in the States that we just don't think of any other way of life or even comprehend it. So hearing this, it's one of those where it's like I just wonder. I feel like for me it would be a thing where I would appreciate it more because I think it would give everyone the time to kind of go through those stages of grief, of denial, acceptance, and bargaining and all those things. But you get to do it while the person's still here.
Everybody has those regrets. Oh, I wish I would have said I love them. I wish I would have apologized for that thing that I did, that infraction when I was a young person or whatever. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. So I guess it depends on a lot of factors. If you're a religious person, then you have this extra bonus component to it,
So, kind of a launching off point from that, since we're talking about you not living here in the States anymore, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you moved to Berlin in 2003, correct?
I live in Belgium.
Belgium, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I live outside of a city called Ghent in the country of Belgium. And yeah, I moved here 22 years ago, approximately.
So something I was kind of thinking about trying to, as best as I can, just being slightly out of high school myself at that point within 2 years. But I was trying to think back to the climate, like politically and globally, where we all were after the events of like 9/11 and stuff like that. And I feel like I remember a lot changing, even as 2 years later. What was it about that time frame for you to decide to move out of the country, and what do you remember about making that decision?
Well, I didn't move out of the country for political reasons.
No, but I was trying to just think about like where we were as a country at that point, and it just seemed very up in the air with a lot of things that were happening. And again, that's through a 17, 18-year-old memory.
Yeah. Well, politically, I guess, to speak, in my lifetime, it's always been, I've always kind of perceived the American government in different stages of, this kind of apathetic government. And I grew up in the 70s. And when Reagan was in power, when Reagan was the president, he was very conservative and very strict. Also, a television celebrity, a film celebrity, and that spawned a lot of restrictions for people. We were not allowed to listen to punk music. We were not allowed to listen to metal music, and we were not allowed to listen to metal and punk together become hardcore. That's the formula for that. So like that kind of music, underground music itself, was frowned upon, heavily frowned upon, so much so that they had this group called the PMRC, which, much like the car making billionaire, was an unelected group. Had just decided that they were going to be their own government unit, and they were able to command police to do their bidding. And they didn't go after so much of the really underground people because they just weren't aware of them, but they went after people like, I guess the most underground of the list would have been Jello Biafra from Alternative Tentacles and Dead Kennedys. they went after him and attacked him. They also went after people like Ice-T and Frank Zappa, Twisted Sister, and the list goes on. And that was a pretty bleak time. And the silver lining of it, though, was a lot of the musicians and a lot of the people in the underground music saw it as an opportunity to really put the fuel in their tank to make their music more volatile, more aggressive, and their message more strong, based off of the oppression of the government at the time. And it wasn't even really the government, even though it was government approved, sort of, but not officially approved. That's the reason why you see those stickers on records that say
parental advisory,
and all
explicit
that.
content. Yeah.
They also made it so like you had to have lyrics shown, and that like it used to be that you'd have lyrics shown because that would be fun and people could share. And then it became a thing where you were like, I don't really want to have lyrics. So for me, like it kind of growing up in that way, I'm proud of my lyrics. I like my lyrics. And I like to share my lyrics, but there's a part of me that I prefer to not have lyrics or any kind of text on my artwork. I don't know if anyone's out there seen any of my records, but you'll see they're kind of more visual with imagery rather than word. And even on the cover of the records, I put like a special clear ink, so you can't see the song titles. You have to turn it. Of course, that's an aesthetic decision as well, but part of it is because I grew up in that climate, and I have this like, I don't know, like a pride in a way to say, I'm going to keep these for myself so that these fucking auditors, these inquisitors can't hold me accountable or whatever. But yeah, it was a tricky time to grow up, and and being interested in this kind of music too was dangerous. People wanted to attack you on the streets if you had like a Misfits shirt, for example. If you had a shirt that had a Misfits skull, and most times you had to make them yourself because shirts weren't like they are now that you can buy them, including Misfits, you can buy them in like department stores. And I'm not knocking them for it. I love the band and I love those guys, and I'm glad that they can do that. And I'm also glad that younger people are able to enjoy the band and wear the shirts and not be attacked on the street. It was quite a different time. So when the point of this meandering response for me is that in those days, everything seemed bleak, and it seemed like this was the end of the world. It also was the Cold War too, So every day was going to be, a nuclear holocaust around the corner. So over time, that just kept happening. And then, of course, 9/11 and other, the Koresh attacks and different things. And all of those events ended up dividing people within the United States, and people looking for some kind of hope, some kind of person that might be telling the truth. Unfortunately, none of them are telling the truth. And it's sad that the people who feel that one person is actually telling the truth and the other one isn't, that's not really the case. It's pretty much all those guys are full of shit. They're just playing with everybody and dividing everybody. And they're dividing everybody for a reason, because once all these people realize that they're getting taken advantage of and laughed at, if they were to organize together, some of those amendment rights that they hold so precious, it might be time to actually invoke them and put them into effect, and go after this tyranny. But that's why they're dividing everybody, to keep everybody weak. That's how it goes. And unfortunately, they're falling for it.
I think the thing as I get older, and having grown up out in Delaware, that's where I was originally born and raised before moving here to Michigan, it was so interesting to grow up out there. And one of the big things that was a big learning thing in school was basically the original 13 colonies, the story of how the country came to be, the Declaration of Independence, and a lot of those things, like to the point where, I've talked about with a friend of mine that now lives out here that's from Philly. I've had these questions as I get older where I'm like, did you guys learn a lot about our history of as a country and like these things where it was like maybe a full curriculum of just this thing? And I go versus, and I go, you guys can't explain this part, but like when I moved out here in like 95, in probably sixth, seventh grade, that was all condensed down to like a day and a half. And it's like, how do you how do you explain all of the things that happened and the bigger repercussions of everything and why it was happening in a day and a half? Like you just summarized the entire foundation of this country in a day and a half. Like that seems like you're not really giving it the credence that it is, or more to the point, maybe as I get older, maybe it's not that big of a deal. I don't know. Like it's interesting how to grow up so young and in such an interesting, like in an area where your culture and what you grew up and how it came to be was very important. And then it's like you come out here to Michigan and it just does not feel like that. And I can't really explain it to a lot of people because it's just not no one lived that same thing that I guess I went through, the culture shock kind of other things as well. But I constantly think about that where it's like, you would think that we would all kind of learn the same things the same way, if we're all teaching and there's a fundamental, this is what you need to learn for first grade, second grade, and et cetera. And it's not the case. And I kind of often wonder how much of that is due to just, and I'm saying this, I'm not putting this into anyone else's, like anyone else has said this, but because I feel like living out here in the Midwest, especially pre-internet and all that, things didn't get to us here. It took a while to kind of get some sort of culture that wasn't just, camping, hunting, those kind of things, a very easy kind of life. And I often wonder how much of that is on purpose. And
Yeah.
as I get older now, it's just, I feel like it becomes a thing. And then I even think back to, music, like growing up out here, I remember the kind of the foundations of like rap and hip hop and R&B and stuff out east. And even some of the more kind of hardcore or what would become now, I guess, more metalcore for my timeline. But it's like thinking about how segregated everything was and like thinking about, like Brandon's a great example from Bleeding Through. Those guys had a completely different fashion sense that was normal out in California, but then they'd come out east and, they get called gay or whatever just because of their appearance. And it's because it's not what was known out there. And it's like just thinking about how musically it's segregated and there's a lot of misinformation that goes around and all this kind of stuff to kind of feel like to divide people. So why wouldn't that same kind of principle maybe be applied to our how we grow up with culture and our government and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it definitely is. It is a construct that they're working deliberately to divide people in different ways. And then because they're trained that way, then it spills over into popular culture or into entertainment culture like music. When I was a child and hip hop was starting out, and this would have been, the early 80s when I first just found out about it, I thought that it was the same thing as listening to Slayer and listening to Sam Hain and Septic Death and Misfits and things like that. I thought that they were all kind of the same. I remember when NWA's first LP came out, it was sold out just like a hardcore record would have been sold like on a small label. And my friends and I went to a small record store and bought it. And the people there were pretty shocked that we were buying it because we looked more punk, And it was me and my friend Derek Green. He's now the singer of Sepultura, and my friend Bill Gill. And we went there and we bought the 12-inch of NWA. And in our minds, it had the same energy as Slayer did, or as a punk record did.
Absolutely.
But other kids didn't see it like that. They saw it as, like you said, segregated. There was even like a shaming kind of a thing. Like if you liked one kind of music that was, and it still goes on. I mean, if like my band Integrity has a lot of different components to it, different parts of the recipe, I guess. It's just anything that I like. I don't have any rules to it. So there might be parts that are very heavy metal with the lead guitars and something like that. And then I have a lot of times people getting upset and complaining and belly aching on the internet that it's too heavy metal for them. And this isn't fucking Uber Eats and you're not ordering a pizza. I'm not going to custom make it for you, you know? So if you're that fucking entitled, listen to some other fucking band. I don't want you to listen to my band. I don't care. But these people found themselves to become divas that they think that they can special order music for themselves. The whole point of making something, creating something, is that you enjoy it. If you enjoy what you're creating, that's the only thing that matters. You should not be concerned with pleasing anyone else. And if you're trying to please people, but with your creations, you're going to always fall short. You can't please anybody except for yourself.
I think that's something I was actually talking with someone yesterday about, was just kind of this thing of, it's funny when you do something creative, everyone will be the first to tell you why it sucks, what's wrong with it, and all this kind of shit. But then when you throw it back at them going, okay, do better, do something then and do better. Like, I've often said, like, this show started because I watched a bunch of people on the internet talking to people I wanted to have conversations with and thought that they were wasting the opportunity by going like, so how's tour? And it's like, really? You got this cool opportunity and you're just, that's what you're bringing to the table, is that? Fuck you. I could do better. And so I sat out to do better. And better is contrary to whoever is on the other side of, making the judgment. But I love now when I get someone that's like, your show fucking sucks, or, you didn't ask this or whatever. And I go, then do better. That's literally how I started the show. And I'm now talking to someone you are taking the time to listen to. So you know what? I've had a great almost 9 years doing this. I challenge you, do better. Because I think you're going to I hope you have a good time doing this. But a lot of people I don't think are willing to actually put themselves out there and give credence to like their thoughts and ideas. And, speaking of Ice-T, something that, I had tweeted at him a while ago that, it was, I think about it all the time, is, I was mad that someone sent me something like that. And I was really proud of what I had done. And Ice-T subtweeted my thing and goes, remember, haters only hate up, they don't hate down.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a really fucking poignant thing. And I have applied it to not just this, but so many facets of my life, that if you got a hater, probably doing something they wish they could and just can't or won't do, more importantly.
Yeah, it's often jealousy or just the fact that they just can't get anything off the ground. So they're bitter and then they want to try to tear everybody down because it's lonely at the bottom.
Yeah. Something kind of piggybacking off of my talking about moving from out east to here in the Midwest. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you're from the Ohio area. Yeah, that's where you were born initially.
I was born in Indiana.
Okay, so
not too far from Grand Rapids, I guess. I was born in Marion, Indiana, which is near like LaFountain.
Okay,
that kind of area. Muncie.
Yeah, it's a couple hours away from here.
There's not much going on there.
I would imagine. But
it's very sparse there. It's very, very rural.
But something I was kind of thinking about is, especially like you're saying, like really growing up before there was a lot of like no internet, no nothing. Tape trading, I would imagine, is probably like the biggest.
Even VCRs yet.
Okay.
There was, you had vinyl records, cassette tapes did exist. That's it.
But I was trying to think, when you started wanting to be in bands and so forth, and you're not maybe having as much access to things that are happening in bigger cities and kind of finding these underground scenes, do you feel that it was sort of the lack of rules potentially that made you want to just take all these different influences and kind of make what would become kind of your sound over time of integrity and so forth? Like, do you think is a byproduct of that?
That's a complicated question because I think about it often, especially in this type of context, but it's difficult to say. And I don't want to say it in a way that would discourage younger people from thinking that from them being able to understand that they can do this too. I would say that the limited amount of resources that I grew up with definitely supercharged my imagination because
Mm.
I was not given it's like this the difference of reading a book and watching a movie. When you read a book, whatever characters, whatever locations, whatever anything visual, it all comes from in here. You have to imagine that. When you watch a movie, they show it to you. And good movies, sometimes they won't show you like the monster, for example. So then at least you can imagine the monster. And usually when you imagine that monster, he's much more terrifying than anything that they could have come up with. And so they win in that regard as well. And so, there's a lot of younger people who've grown up with phones and they're seeing everything that someone else wants them to see. So their imagination, I worry, is being stunted. It's not being as developed as it could be. But I'm hesitant to say that because I don't want to discourage people from being creative. That's something that's my religion, I guess. I like to encourage people to be creative. I think it would be important for people to spend some time imagining things, to spend some time away from devices. I'm unable to be away from devices much because of my work. I have to be in communication with people. I also have to be in communication with people for my music, my band, the record labels, people that are booking my tours, and all of the other things that go in, getting the shirts made or all these things, and also to people who are listening to my music. Oftentimes, I'll get messages from people who want to ask a question about a song or whatever. So I spend a lot of time on it, and it's it can be discouraging and daunting to be stuck in that universe too much. And I think getting outside of this internet world and just thinking on your own, it really can be uh, advantageous. It's like going to the gym, but for your mind. And I would hope that people do that a little bit more whenever they can. But you know, so to answer your question, I think that yes, um, being without even a VCR, I couldn't. If I one story that I often tell is one of my most favorite things as a small boy in the 1970s was every Friday night, close to midnight, they would have what was called a horror host, and they would play one horror movie a week, one. And I would wait for that, and I would stay up, and I would watch that show. And because VCRs weren't invented, and I don't know if I even imagined that would be a possibility. I don't think I did, but I did have a cassette deck, like a small one that you could just like. I think that people would really use it to talk into, so they could dictate into it, and then later like write down their ideas or type their ideas. I think that was probably the original purpose of this type of tape deck, cassette deck. And I would take it and I would put it right next to this television, and it was the big kind of televisions that look like furniture rather than televisions do now. And really heavy as well. And I would put it right next to the speaker, and I would hit record with the tape. And as much as I could record, because the tapes would be like 60 minutes, but the movie would be 2 hours. I'd have to try to flip it over. And I would record the audio from these shows. And then throughout the week, I'd play them back and listen to them. And then I would draw what I thought I was remembering from the movie. And oftentimes it would be wrong, which was great because I was reimagining the movie, and then I got to see the movie more than once from a different perspective, from my own imagination, and I really enjoyed doing that. And doing that because I was bored, because I lived in Indiana in a place that there was just farms around me pretty much. So being able to do that really developed my imagination the same way that if I was lifting weights every day as a small boy, would have developed my muscles in my upper body, and it developed my imagination that way, for better or for worse. But I'm grateful to it, and I'm happy that occurred. Um, I guess that's the best way I can talk about it. I don't know. It's a difficult thing. I don't think that I have a lot of people who are my age or older, or some are even younger, who will complain and say, "Oh, I wish that I had it as difficult as you guys did in the olden days." But at the same time, I do remember like recording or writing for like early albums of mine, and this was before people could put up like a waveform on the screen of a computer. You didn't have computers anyways, but um, as accessible, people had computers, but everybody didn't have computers. Normal people did not have them. But I remember taking cassette tapes that we would record at rehearsal of the music, taking those tapes home, playing the tape with the music from a new song, for example. And I remember thinking in my head, you know what would be so great is if I could see the song somehow. I didn't imagine what a wave would look like. And for the people who don't know what that is, sort of like an earthquake, this kind of a shape, how the sound waves go. And I remember thinking, instead of having to rewind it and then miss my cue, miss where I wanted to go, and I have to try to count and say, is this the right amount of times? And do I have enough lyrics and everything? I remember thinking, wouldn't that be so great if I could just like visually, like I'm a visual person. So I thought if I could visually see the song, then I could know that this is the part where the chorus is here. Oh, and it repeats here and it repeats here. And this is the verse and the verse and the verse and the intro is here and the breakdown is there and the outro, whatever it would be. And I could visualize it better. Then I would know like where those places were and know how many times those parts go. Then I could match the lyrics correctly instead of having to write 10 times more lyrics than I needed, then doing it in the studio and then being like, oh, fuck, I have way too much shit and I have to edit it down and in my mind. And yeah, so back then I did hope for modern technology. I also really would be like, I would say to my friends, wouldn't it be so amazing if one day we could have like the means to record our own songs in our home that would sound good? And now we do.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of positives to this. I don't want to be this cranky old man who says, "Oh, my day things were better," because they were not better. But some things maybe, but also it could be my conditioning. Maybe it could be like the situation that I was thrown into, and all those factors together culminated into me becoming me. Whereas somebody else who had the exact same experience probably would have ended up differently, including all the children that I grew up with in Indiana. Most of those children grew up and they became farmers. They never went into extreme music. I don't think they ever even heard extreme music in their lifetime, probably. So I was a fluke. No, please.
I was gonna say, I feel like something in that though is, and it's almost, I feel the same way, where you wanted it. You were passionate enough to, regardless of any obstacles that could have been in your way, you never gave up. And I feel like that still separates those that do from those that don't. Even like you said, it's so easy to create something now with literally GarageBand and stuff like that being available on our phones. The capabilities to be creative in some sort of capacity are always there. But I feel like when I hear like you tell that story, and I remember hearing a slight variation of that story you told, where you were essentially creating loops.
Yeah.
And something that I found really interesting about that, because like right now I'm reading a kind of secondhand biography of this producer Jay Dilla that's from Detroit, and he was really big on creating loops from old records and so forth. And in this book and in his career, technology kind of changed, allowed him to have more time that he could record and make his loops, and then have more accessibility because he didn't have the technology to make it feel the way he heard it. So he created this off time feel called Dilla time. And it's just so wild to like be reading this and thinking about it didn't deter him from doing something that he had in his, that he was passionate about, that he had in him to still want to create. He found a way to make it work. And I think that's what makes those pioneers, those people who have legacies that when you look back, you're like, you did something different that did not exist or wasn't really as big that you would have been able to pull from. It had to come from you. It had to come from you wanting to do this and be creative. It took you, recording horror movies and listening back to them. And something you had said even earlier that I thought was kind of interesting. And I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this, but you were talking about how, like, on your CD booklets or your album covers and so forth, you don't really like there to be obstruction. You don't want to give your words away. You're more of a visual person. But it's interesting because I think a lot of people think of you as someone, as a lyricist, as someone whose words mean so much to them. But it's interesting that I don't really think maybe that you think of words in the same way that we think of words. I think you think of words as more of a visual thing, that it evokes this thing that you see in your head, not necessarily the things I'm writing.
Yeah,
So I wonder if that's something you've thought about, is that you are, you just said that you are a very visual person, but do you ever really think about how both of those things exist for you at all, and how they work for you?
yeah. I mean, didn't I didn't try to become a musician. It was an accident. This isn't what I was supposed to be. I was more interested in doing collage art and doing
Hmm.
artwork. And I became a musician by mistake, pretty much. And so when I create music, I create music from a visual perspective. As far as lyrics are concerned, that's there's a lot of levels to it. The main level, I would say, is that I'm more of a conduit.
Hmm.
These things sort of come through me, channeled through me, rather um, than I'm sitting here pontificating about some philosophy or something. Although I do think about things and I do read a lot, but ultimately it sort of comes from another place. It isn't something that I don't set out and say I'm going to write a song about this because of this event. There are a lot of people who do that, and nothing against that, but that isn't the way that I work. So it sort of comes through me in an unconscious way.
Hmm.
And I guess maybe so does the artwork too and the music. I don't know. But I have a different approach. It also could be because I'm self-taught and I'm doing it wrong. But I'm doing it so wrong that it ends up working somehow like that, I guess. It's complicated. And I also don't take it as like I enjoy what I do, and I'm doing it for my own entertainment, and it's nice that other people also enjoy it sometimes. But when people don't like it, I'm not upset, and much to their chagrin, I'm not upset probably, but I'm not upset because I'm only doing it to entertain myself. If other people want to eavesdrop and enjoy it too, fucking great. But I'm not going to take, requests. I'm not going to take, people's input or their suggestions because I don't care. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm not a chef at a restaurant and you're sending your steak back because you don't like the way that I prepared it. If you don't like it, there's a lot of other bands. I mean, now there's more bands than ever that you can be listening to, and I have no problem with anybody listening to other bands instead of mine. I would prefer it. In fact, I would prefer that the only people who listen to my music are people who really enjoy it. And if you don't like it, I think that it would be ideal if they didn't listen to it. So I didn't go into this hoping to win like an award or have applause or have praise or anything. I did it because I do it because it's just who I am. I'm an expressive person, and I accidentally became a musician through art, but I see it as an extension of the visual stuff and the visual expression.
Um,
Hope that doesn't sound uh, condescending or arrogant or anything. And that's not my intention to be an elitist about it. It's just that I'm not chasing after accolades. I'm not chasing after people to tell me that I'm doing good, pat me on the head. I'm just doing what I like to do. And a lot of that also probably stems from when I was young, the first music that really grabbed a hold of me when I started to become 13, a teenager, and you started to break away from being a child, was punk music. And I loved the ferocity of punk music and the defiance of punk music. So the way I interpreted it at the time was that they didn't give a fuck and they did whatever they wanted to do. And so I sort of thought, I like that. I want to do that too. And so I've been throughout my life having to deal with people who can't understand that might be my approach. I guess they can't understand that someone else might have a different approach than them sometimes, but I don't care. It doesn't matter. The reason I'm mentioning it now is just because you had mentioned before that sometimes people criticize your program, and you really shouldn't give them any mind to it at all. Just keep doing what you like to do. If they don't like it and they're still watching it, then you have the bonus that you're torturing the fuck out of them and driving them insane. That's a wonderful gift.
Yeah, there was someone recently that commented. I was like, I'm sorry that I apparently made you click on this video and spend the whole time watching something that you hated. And I was like, I'll make sure to check with you to make sure I don't do that to you ever again. And I was
Well,
like,
unfortunately, that's what they were hoping for, was the interaction, probably.
yeah, I know. But you know what? It also drives up stuff for me too. So I'll actively engage even if it's negative, because even that's feeds the algorithms and shit. So it's like, all
Yeah,
right,
that's right. Yeah, I often forget that that's how it works. It's true. I often forget. For me, I'd like to just delete everybody's fucking opinions off my stuff. So
yeah,
sometimes I forget that is a beneficial thing.
Something you said actually kind of really interesting way of thinking about what you do is you just said that, like, if someone wants to eavesdrop on what I'm doing in kind of relation to your music, it's such an interesting way of putting it. When did you come up with that way of how others or listen to your art as eavesdropping?
Yeah, I just have always thought of it like that. I just thought of it as I always thought, and I'm 100% certain that I'm wrong, but I always thought that being a creative person, being a musician, being anything like that, was that you're supposed to express who you are and your thoughts and just get it out of your system in a way, like exercising demons in a way. And the type of music, I like a lot of different types of music. So I will listen to something, and probably like what you said earlier about your podcast, you watch several podcasts and you said, these are good, but it would be so much better if someone did it this way. So who better to do it than you? So you started your podcast and you did it your way. And it's sort of like that. That's how I thought of creating artwork or music, is just that this is what I would like to see, but I'm not seeing it. This is what I'd like to hear, but I'm not hearing it. This band has great guitar solos and it's amazing, but I don't like the singer. It's too falsetto. I would rather have had like someone like Lemmy from Motorhead singing for early Motley Crue, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that, where I would say, this is pretty good, but it would be better if this and this and this was happening. And rather than going on to, you couldn't have done it at the time, but rather than going on to a futuristic comment section and say, well, I would do it differently, I just did do it differently and made my own thing. And I did it for my own enjoyment, for my own pleasure. And that's why I still do it. And I don't really, I don't chase after, I don't chase after anybody's approval except for my own. And there's also been a lot of times where people were heavily upset that I enjoy the music that I make. I enjoy the artwork that I make. It entertains me, and I like to listen to it. And I can't tell you how many people see the world so differently than me because they would say, "Oh, you're so arrogant to listen to your own music. How dare you? Shame on you." And I thought to myself, so if I understand this right, you're saying I should dedicate all this time and effort and heart and soul into making something that I don't like, that I would never listen to again. Why the fuck would I want to do that? Why would you want me to do that? Why would anybody want to do that? It doesn't make sense. I mean, even like the pop people who make, very commercial songs, I'm sure that they like what they're doing. I would hope it at least. Can't imagine someone not liking what they're making. And if they don't like it, then why do it? It's weird to me, but I'm not. I don't feel like I'm a native of this planet or of this species anyway. So that could be part of it. I don't know.
I think So I'm taking it back when you said, that you create stuff that you enjoy as a listener and so forth, and that's kind of where it starts for you. I feel like I was reminded of going on a road trip with a friend of mine who's in a band, and he had just gotten like the final mixes of their upcoming record at the time, and I was like, "Man, you are listening to the shit out of your own record." And he goes, "I fucking love these songs. They're good. They're the best songs I've ever written. I'm fucking proud of them. Why wouldn't I listen to them? Because if I don't feel that way, who the fuck else is going to?" And I was like, and it's just one of those like weird things where you like, it seems, and I don't know again if it's like a condition thing or just because you see so much of this actually happening in so many things where it's like, yeah, well, I was obligated to. We had to make a record this amount of length, this amount of songs, had to put it out in this time frame. So it's like, yeah, it didn't live up to what our standard should be, but we just had to do it this way. And it's like, I think we've just become conditioned to expect that. So when you hear someone that's like, "No, I fucking like my thing," and if I don't, then how would I ever expect anyone else to? And it's like, oh, yeah, that should be how it is. And that makes total sense because, yeah, why wouldn't you like your own shit? Why even do it at that point? And I remember having sort of the same epiphany a while ago because I was writing questions out. And I remember someone asked me, "Why am I writing them out?" And I go, "Because if I'm willing to take the time to actually write these, then I would hope that I feel confident in these questions that I will eventually ask instead of just going, yeah, it's good enough. I have a half hour. That'll fill a half hour." Cause like, what's the fucking point at that point? Like that's a waste of my time and whoever I'm potentially talking to.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing that I would say that I do a little bit differently than your friend is I don't really care if anyone else listens to my records. I'm glad that they do, but I that's not in any way my goal. I don't listen to it and think, this is great, but I bet people would like it better if I did this. I don't do that. I just do what I want to do. I might say, this would be so different if I put this kind of instrument or I put this type of thing in there. That would really be something I've never heard before, and that would be exciting to me. That is exciting to me. That's what I do. And I really like that. And I love when I do a new record and people are mad and they say, "Oh, it doesn't sound exactly like the last one." No shit, it's not the last record. It's not the next one either. It's a different record. But I can appreciate too. I can understand. And I'll use the restaurant analogy again. I can understand if I go to my favorite restaurant and I order my favorite sandwich, if it's completely different every time, I would not be happy about that. But that's a different type of thing than what I'm doing. And people, I would hope are forewarned, like this isn't going to be the easiest situation dealing with this guy. So hopefully that scares off enough people.
Something this is the downfall of like working through a thought in real time. So you had kind of said when we were setting this up that you don't drink anymore, haven't been, and that's fine. But I do wonder because, and I'm projecting at this point right now, but I feel like you're someone that's probably like how I am. Like my brain is constantly thinking of a lot of different things. It's just constantly in motion. And sometimes that's really great, but it's also what drove me to therapy because I would then try to solve a bunch of hypothetical problems that would never ever happen, just so I could be prepared because my mind wanders and all that kind of stuff. And so now I try to be a lot more present and in what I can deal with right now. But something that I do enjoy is I really have started in the last, I'll say 5 or 6 years, really started enjoying psychedelics for me personally, because it kind of allows everything to slow down for me and just kind of deal with things and kind of like when a thought's happening, instead of being like, here's a little bit of the thought, but ooh, now here's another thought, and then here's another thought. It's like, let's just kind of think about this thing that you're dealing with right now. Let's really kind of explore it and just kind of really be in it. And I wonder listening to you talk because I very much think you are a very intelligent person and you very much and I'll say this in my dealings and doing this show with a lot of people who do not live in the States, something that I ended up taking from them uh, is that when they don't know what they want to say, instead of yammering on, looking for the word, trying to not appear stupid, they'll stop, collect their thoughts, and then go, this is what I meant to say, and then continue on with the conversation. I've noticed you do kind of the same thing. I would assume you've probably always been that way. I don't know if that's something you just picked up from living abroad for as long as you have. But it's a thing where I wonder, what do you do to turn your brain off? Or do you never really turn it off and that's not a thing you're interested in?
Well, before, when I did drink, that was why I drank. I would drink because it would be a form of self-medication. It would allow me to stop thinking. And the the way that my brain works is, this is not it's a blessing and a curse, because I'm thinking about a million things at the same time, and there's different levels to my thoughts, and some things are on what would be like the equivalent of the back burner. Those are things that I take a little bit longer for me to figure out. Could be a song, could be anything. And it's like spinning all these plates on sticks. And this is probably a reference for older people, but they used to have this sort of like vaudevillian thing where they would have sticks and they have different plates, and it would be like a form of juggling. And it feels like that often for me. When I stopped drinking, I mainly stopped drinking, and I only stopped drinking really because it was physically taxing on me. I would have terrible hangovers, and I was getting older. But the reason that I would drink was just to escape this world and escape the problems and escape interactions with sometimes people who are incredibly annoying, and for different reasons. They would be annoying for different reasons. And when I stopped drinking, the entire world came into crystal focus, more than 8K, whatever the most highest resolution is available right now. It was higher than that, and it still exists that way. And it's miserable. I feel like to deal with things like that. I create a lot of things, a lot of albums, a lot of recordings, a lot of artwork, and I do it. I don't know why I do it. I just do it. And sometimes the people who I'm friends with don't do nearly as much as I do, and it really drives me crazy. It drives me crazy, literally, like it makes me upset. It's not like I'm saying, "Oh, these rascals are driving me crazy." It really upsets me, and I think that it's wasted potential, and I find it very, very disappointing to my soul, because it's become creating things is a sort of a religion for me. But it's a religion in a way that it's like, I'm purging myself through these creations, and I'm finding myself through these creations. So sometimes, like I said before, like I'm a conduit, And I can go back and I can listen to a song that I created and the words that I've said. And then I can find answers to things that have been bothering me explained. And I can find sometimes solutions within those words. And, that's a wonderful thing. But yeah, I don't drink mainly because because it's physically taxing. Um, but I when I was younger, I did a lot of psychedelics, mostly LSD, but also mushrooms. And I still periodically will do mushrooms. I grow mushrooms in my house, but I often just give them to friends more than I do them myself. I like to be in control of my mind, um, but there is no valve to release the pressure as much anymore, other than performing. Now, performing is a different thing than the creating of the records or of the artwork or any of that. There's a different kind of feeling that the performance gives, which is also fantastic. But that is a pressure release in the real sense of it. And sometimes if I go too long without performing, it starts to build up too much and it can be overwhelming. So I often need that. And sometimes if I go on a tour that's too long, I'll sort of like run out of the fuel a little bit. I won't fully run out, but there'll be points of the tour where it's like, well, I don't have as much of this pure hatred in me or this whatever feeling, whatever emotion I'm trying to get out of me. I might be running a little bit lower than usual. But I rarely am low on stock of hatred. But I mean, disgust for the human race, like the stupidity of it all, and the terrible things that go on.
Have you always been this tapped into yourself to know who you are and what, like you were just explaining, like I know I have this like valve that I need to like let out every so often. Were you always in tune with that, or was that something that took you time to understand?
I mean, most of it was unconscious as a kid. I mean, you just do things because you do them impulsively, and I don't know. I guess it just if it felt better, then that made sense. I mean, I never thought, oh, I'll be a musician and I'll be on stage. I never ever really thought about that, including when I would do like musical experiments as a kid. That was playing with toys. It wasn't I didn't think, I mean, it didn't sound like, the Rolling Stones or whoever would be on the radio, the Bee Gees or whatever would be popular at the time. It just, it sounded like a cacophony, like a madness and craziness. And sometimes it sounded like those horror, those poorly recorded horror shows that I would put on a cassette because they'd be recorded so badly that it would distort and it would have this extra thing to it that wasn't present when I watched the TV. Initially watched it on television, and so it was a different degraded version of the original experience, and that maybe lent itself to it. But I grew up isolated because I lived in an isolated area. There to get to another child to play with, I'd have to like be driven in a truck far to meet some friend of like my grandmother's or something who had a kid or something like that, and then we would play in the woods or whatever. But an interesting thing about growing up in Indiana, this is totally unrelated to it, but it just came to my mind. It's one thing that was great was one thing that I would do all the time would be find arrowheads from Native Americans. They were everywhere. And I would save them up in mason jars, like the glass jars you could put tomatoes in or something. and I would just fill these up. I mean, they were everywhere, and it never dawned on me that was weird, that was not common for everybody else. You know, it was just like a thing I would do all the time. And as I got older, I would say to people, "Yeah, you know, did you do that?" And they would just not even know that would be possible. And in a way, like that's kind of like how messing around with sound was for me as a kid too, because I thought all kids did it. I thought that was something everybody did, and it turned out it wasn't. So
I had a little bit of an experience like that recently. There was a little bit where I thought about trying to do this on like Twitch and kind of make it a little bit more immediate. I don't know why I wanted to do that. I think maybe because I wanted to have there be a little bit more of an interactive thing while it was happening, but kind of realized watching other shows do that, I'm like, the beauty is kind of just 2-on-2. Yes, it's kind of nice to bring other people in, but I think I realized for me, I was looking for what we don't have anymore. You know, yes, we're doing this over technology and all that kind of stuff, but we kind of lost the sitting down. And something I've really kind of been fascinated with lately has been the idea of tribal knowledge and just learning from other people and other experiences that are not my own. But in doing this Twitch thing, I was like, I'm gonna throw on a fucking movie and just like hang out with people. And so I threw on a movie that I had watched like in my early teens, late teens. And people came in and were like, what the fuck is this? This is a very weird movie. I've never seen this. I don't know anything about it. And I was like, well, I mean, like my friends and I used to watch this all the fucking time. And I thought everyone watched this. I thought this was a part of, if you're roughly my age range, this is something we all shared at this point in time. And it made me feel really weird at the time because I was like, oh, maybe I'm fucked up and weird. And this isn't a normal thing that people find entertainment in.
What movie was it?
It was Bam Margera's movie Haggard that he made himself with all of his friends. But it's like the scene someone came, or that a bunch of people started coming in when I was watching it. It was like a scene where one of the guys is jerking off to his own ass because someone's like, you can't go out on a date with a girl with a full load. Like, you got to fucking jerk off. And he's like, I don't have anything. And he goes, I don't know, jerk off to your own ass. Like, beat the fuck off to that. And that was like a scene where everyone came in. They're like, and it's like with I forget the band, but they're doing a like sort of like rockabilly version of Livin' La Vida Loca is playing, and people are just like, what is this? And to me, I'm like, this is a movie I watched with like all my friends. Like, and I don't know, I thought we all watched it. Maybe not. But it was just kind of weird, like to feel this kind of, I don't know if shame would be the word I use, but it's just like, oh, I guess the way we all grew up, potentially regionally or whatever, it's different for everybody, and not everyone has the same experiences. But in that though, something I kind of was thinking of, kind of away from that, talking about movies and so forth, but I wonder, do you wrestle with your art? Because I feel like there's a sense, and again, this is kind of me projecting based on our conversation currently, that I feel like you like things to not be perfect and pretty and all that kind of stuff, that there kind of is a little bit of, you know, danger, and it's not the way, you know, it would fit into anything. Do you struggle with wanting something to be presented in a way that is maybe your version of perfect's the only thing I keep coming up with, and I don't want to use that word. But do you struggle with that? Do you struggle with getting something to where it's presentable, I guess is the word, even though in our conversation you've been like, I don't give a fuck if anyone listens to my shit. If they care, I make it for me. But do you struggle with that at all, like of how it gets presented?
No, not really. With drawing, I draw in a particular way, and that is a violent way, where it is hectic, chaotic, and ferocious, I suppose.
It's visceral is the word I get
There's
when
a
I
lot
see
of
it.
I use razor knives. I use the wrong kind of pens. I use calligraphy pens that have a very sharp edge, and so I can do a very fine line if I turn it this way, and a very bold line if I turn it that way. For example, it's the blade. This is a similar type thing to what the blade looks like. So you can go this way and get a really thin line, and go this way and get a very thick line, and then you can sort of stab it, and then it sprays ink as well. And I really like using that tool. What happened was 20 years ago or something, my wife bought me a Christmas gift of calligraphy pens.
Mm.
And I thought, thanks. I didn't want calligraphy pens. And I was, sometimes you get a gift and you smile and you say thank you, but you really didn't want this fucking baby blue sweater with a big turtleneck or whatever, like you get these gifts from relatives and you're like, oh, thanks. I'm glad you know me so well. But she bought me these calligraphy pens, and then I thanked her, but I thought, I don't want this shit. I draw vampires, I draw monsters. And so I thought to myself, well, I should try to use it, and maybe I could write her name in calligraphy and give her a gift to show that I appreciated the gift. So I started to write her name, and I wasn't really connecting with the calligraphy the way that I should have. And then I got frustrated. So I just started like getting into a zone and like started doodling fucking demons and monsters and things. And it started to like spatter the ink too. And I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then eventually I sort of like came out of my dream and saw that there was this splattery abstract vampire kind of face, and I thought, wow, this actually is a great tool. And then I rushed to tell her how what a great gift it was. I don't know how she took it, because I obviously used them the wrong way, but I've been using them ever since, and it has a very cathartic method to them, because when I draw with those, it's expressive, very expressive. But if I do something that's computer based or or meticulous as a collage, which I do sometimes for my album covers, those need to be a sort of type of perfect. And I mean perfect in the sense of what others would say perfect. It has everything is where it should be, and it's not as messy as the drawings. The drawings are quite messy, and the two different sides of my personality. I have a lot of different aspects to who I am. So the drawings express one side of me, the collage expresses a different side of me, and the music is another side, and the lyrics are a different side, and all these things are just different pieces of the puzzle that eventually becomes who I am.
It's just one of those. I wondered, having seen your art and stuff like that, like I said, it's a very visceral thing. I think your music is always a very visceral thing, but I feel like they're just this weird duality of like, is it hard to kind of combine the two things? Is there a struggle within when you're creating? Like, I want it to be kind of sloppy and these kind of things, because that's what makes this. That's what makes it's me. But I also need it to be this other thing too, especially like, and I'm kind of looking more at like band stuff, like music.
Yeah, I think I understand what you mean. So there has been times where people say, "Oh, you should make these your album cover," and then I don't want to. I don't think that they make sense as the album cover. I do draw those. Mainly, what I do is I get test press copies of my records, and then I draw those and make those the covers, because I want an excuse to draw. I like to draw. It's a lot of fun for me to draw them. And oftentimes people, oh, you should make that the cover. And I never make it the cover. I've used them as sketches and then perfect them as a couple times I've used it for covers. So like I have a live album that came out I think last year, and I used what was a drawing and then cleaned it up a lot in computer and added extra components to add extra layers, added extra tools to make it look a little more presentable, because I think that they're just too barbaric to be album covers that are printed on an offset press professionally. As far as drawings that are for test press covers or just artwork that people can display if they want or whatever, then I'm okay with them being that that violent. But it's somehow, I mean, I did take the advice and try to put them into templates, and it just didn't look right to me. So I didn't go forward with it. There's just something else. There's a certain kind of, I have an expectation for certain things that I'd make. And those drawings, while I'm completely satisfied with the end result, and I'm really thrilled with being able to make them the way that I make them, and every part of it is rewarding for me. But it just doesn't seem to work right in that capacity. You know, I think that maybe the explanation would be better explained this way. When I make those drawings, I cut the paper with razors. I splatter ink on them. There's also an old technique of rub off, for lack of a better word, like rub off transfer halftones and things like that are in there that are like kind of like transparent stickers or like Scotch tape type material that has dots on it. And I'll put that in there too. So there's this tactile quality to it that is lost when it's reproduced on an offset press, like a real album cover would be. So all of that is doled out. The texture, the thickness of like the splatter, the carving of the paper, the ripping of sometimes I carve it and it cuts a hole right through the fucking thing. That's lost when they reproduce it. You don't have that anymore. Like you could have a nice sheet of paper like this. That's what would come out of it. But when you wad it up, now it has its own imperfections. Now all these imperfections, you can feel them, and you can see them, you can experience them. And so like that's the difference, I guess, from the two. And it doesn't mean that either one is better than the other. It seems that I'm diluting and watering down the end result of the drawings if I put them as a cover, because of extra tears and you know, scratch marks, they're made impotent. They're not there anymore. So
yeah.
But I never really thought about it, I guess. But I think that's maybe the answer.
Well, as I say, I work at a screen printing place, so like I think of things like that because I make the inks and stuff, and a lot of times it's like, well, we need this ink because this texture doesn't look right, and it's like we're trying to replicate something on a flat surface that wasn't flat. And then adversely, because I have a lot of tattoo artist friends, it's like sometimes tattoo artists are also the worst graphic designers because they're used to doing something that's on a flat surface. And it's like a lot of other people that understand like how a shirt's going to lay. And if I put this here, it'll have movement and all this kind of stuff. Like as I've gotten into observing a lot of different art forms, it's interesting to see how like you would think, well, art's art. And if you know how to do this, then you can apply it over here. And it's like, not really. Like they are kind of very specific to the mediums that you're using to express whatever artistically you are. So I was just kind of thinking about, since I know you do a lot of different things, and even musically, you do a lot of different things, how do you balance that out? So it seems like it kind of is a little bit of, you have more of an understanding, like I said earlier, like you seem very much of someone who is very intentful or have a lot of intentions with what you do. Nothing is not where it's supposed to be. So I
there's
assume
intention, but there's also intuition. And the intuition informs like why I feel that those drawings wouldn't work in that way. There's a gut thing to it. What is the name of your print shop?
The place I work at is called Vector Distribution. We do a lot of stuff that you'll see at like the mall, like PacSun, Zoomies, and stuff like that. We used to do stuff, but we still do stuff for like touring artists as well. Like we just did a giant run for this rapper Tyler the Creator for his like arena tour. Do a lot of stuff for like Eminem. So we do a lot of different stuff. Some of it sucks. I think a lot of it sucks. Some of it's kind of cool. But it's just interesting to take it in. What was that?
I like some of Tyler's new album.
It's interesting. I think he's always kind of pushing what quote unquote hip hop is at the time, and it's a little bit subversive with
That's the
a
good
lot
thing
of what he
about hip
does.
hop is that it always evolves, and in a way,
Absolutely.
it's deliberately disposable, and I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah.
It's always evolving. They're not always nostalgic, and there's not a lot of like, unless you're old and out of touch, then you're stuck in your old ways. But if you're really into it, it's like always evolving, and you never know where it's going to go, and that's exciting, I think. Not that
A
his whole
friend.
album is great to me, though. I don't like it all. The overly "I'm a nerd" kind of thing that I'm not really interested in that. But some of the use of like the African rock samples that he used is really fantastic.
Yeah. Kind of one of the last questions I got for you before I gotta go back and do some yard work. Um, I was listening to a podcast today with Theo Vaughn and Danny McBride, and something in their conversation that Theo posited to Danny, I thought was really interesting, and I thought I would throw it to you and kind of see what it evokes out of you. But essentially, Theo was, because Righteous Gemstones, the show that Danny McBride created and all that stuff,
I'm
it's on
familiar.
its last season, um, and it was a thing where he goes, Theo asks him, are you aware, or do you think about how many of these you have left in you, these creative endeavors? Do you think about how many you have left in you, and like when you're done with all these things? So I kind of was thinking about that, like the idea of sort of finality or whatever. Maybe it's legacy in some weird offshoot, but when you're done creating something, either an album or an art piece or whatever, do you think about that? Do you think about like how many more of these do I have left in me, or does that kind of taint sort of the whole process and everything that went into creating this thing?
No, I don't ever think of that. I don't have that problem. I can always make something. In fact, I make too much. That's why I do the drawing, and then I do all the different things. It's because I can't stop making things. I don't know if it would be better if I made less. I don't know if I'd be more relaxed if I made less. I'm not sure. Um,
Hmm.
but I've had people ask me, "Oh, aren't you looking forward to retiring from all of this?" Why would I want to stop? I enjoy doing this. Like in my neighborhood, people, my neighbors would ask that. They think that it's like a burden, but it's not a burden at all. It's
Hmm.
something I look forward to.
Just like I said, I kind of assumed that would be probably the answer that you would give, but was just a thing where I don't know, everyone's creative path and journey, especially when you've been doing something for so long. I think that's inevitably a question I think we all assume we kind of work our way through. I think I'm very much the same way though. I often think about, I don't think I'm ever going to stop wanting to work or do something, because I think I've seen through like my grandparents and the generation before that, it's like when you stop, you die.
Oh yeah.
And I don't want that. Like I want to be creative and I want to keep doing things um, until I no longer can. But the idea of just being like, well, I hit this age and I retire, or whatever. It's like I still want to do something. I want to still feel like I have purpose and value. Um, so I don't envision that I would ever stop doing something, whatever that is, whether it's doing something like this or who knows what. But the grand scheme of things, I don't think I ever stop to think about legacy or how many of these more I can do or whatever. I'm always will do something that fulfills me in some way, shape, or form, because I have this thought of, if I don't, then what's the fucking point of continuing on?
Yeah. I don't have any idea how many records I've made. People have asked me before, and I have no idea. And if you look on Discogs, it's not complete either. So I don't really have any idea how many records I have. Sometimes I'll receive a package in the mail of a record that I forgot that I had made, and it just comes because it takes a lot longer for records to get manufactured nowadays. But that's happened a few times. It might be old age. It might be why I forgot, but I just enjoy it. I also do a group or do an act called Psywarfare, which is violent electronic music. It's not for dancing. It's essentially like how your grandmother probably perceives when you play like one of your more extreme metal records or punk records. It, that's the idea, is to take it even further than what anybody's expectations were. That's the idea of it. But there is no real rule. It can be different things too. So I do that as well. So I'm always doing something different, and these things keep me I guess keep me slightly sane. I don't know if sane would be the right word, but
Quelled was the word I kept coming up with.
keep me a little bit, a little bit calmer, but not
Yeah.
calm enough. But yeah, but it's something that I've always done, and I don't really know why, but I just keep doing it. It's just who I am. And I understand that a lot of people are not interested in the things I have to express or what I have to say, and that's fine. Just I keep doing it. There's enough people that are interested and do find it appealing enough that I can continue doing it. That's great.
I think there's something admirable in that you have never lost your why. You've kind of always known what it is. And as someone sitting on the other side, where I have at times, I think it's a very commendable thing that you know what it is, and you're
I think
continuing
that
able to.
if you have writer's block, if you have these kinds of things, it isn't because you have nothing to say. It is not because you have no creative juices in you anymore. It's because you've doubted it all. Essentially, while you look at me now, you can see that I'm clearly not a child anymore. But inside me is that same child that I was when I was small. That was curious. That was trying to like avoid the real world by creating an imaginary world. And I never killed that child. That child still is within me. And a lot of people, they kill that child. They don't want to have the creative, or they're afraid of having a creative side of them, or they're embarrassed of it, or they find it childish, or they're, someone has told them, oh, you shouldn't do that. You need to put on a suit and tie and go and do what everyone else is doing. And then they start to conform, and then they lose that part of themselves. And to be an artist is to still have the child inside of you, the childlike mind inside of you, all the time. And once you lose that, then you start to age, then you start to die. I mean, physically, obviously, everybody ages, but creatively, all children are creative. You can go and look at any small kid, and they're gonna like sit in the sand, and they're gonna come up with 5,000. 5 kids, they're gonna come up with 5 different scenarios of what's going on in that sand. One kid is on the moon, one kid is in the desert, one kid is, different thing, making food, maybe. Who knows what they're gonna come up with? They're all gonna come up with something different because everybody's creative. But unfortunately, the education system is designed to take that out of you and to keep you, make you an employee. And good employees aren't creative people. They're just functioning robots, I guess. They do what they're told, and if you break from that, then you're a bad employee. So they don't want that. So they want to try to kill your spirit and kill the inner child. And I think it's important for people to have that and to enjoy it, even if, and there's nothing wrong with having a job in an office. There's nothing wrong with wearing a tie. There's nothing wrong with any of the things that I just said. And I'm not trying to make anybody feel guilty that they have that, but I would like to see those same people find something that they really love. If they hate, and there's a lot of people who hate their jobs, and it would be great for them to find a hobby, whatever it would be, whether it be, making splattery drawings, or whether it would be, a creative way to cut your lawn with your lawnmower. It could be anything, or, cooking a special dinner for your family that would be something different than they normally eat. Anything and everything, it makes you who you are. And when you lose that and you just want to be like everybody else, I get it. Like I understand, like it would be a lot easier if I was like everybody else, but I would fucking hate it. I would be so bored. Conformity isn't something that I dislike because I'm trying to be a rebel. It's something I dislike because I think it's a fate worse than death, you know, to be following everyone else and have no mind of your own, and have disagreeing with people is a fantastic thing. That's what creates all kinds of conversations. Doesn't necessarily have to be hostile, but you know, I might disagree with the way that something looks, and then you would make your own version of that. So we both just inspired each other because of that disagreement. I think that's a wonderful gift.
I 100% agree. I feel like I could keep talking with you and piggybacking off of a lot of different things, but I feel like I'd be doing a disservice to my wife right now. So I very much appreciated the time today talking with you. This is something, you know, as I'm approaching like my 500th episode and a few episodes beyond this one.
Congratulations.
Thank you. A lot of great people and a lot of great conversations are kind of falling into place where I feel like they should. And it's just another reminder of why I enjoy doing this so much. And the fact that first of all, thank you for sharing the episode with Brandon. Like that was such a shock to me to see, because, you know, I'm so used to just doing this thing and then it just kind of does and has a life of its own once it's released. So the fact that anyone shares it cares.
He's a great guy. And I was happy to hear it. So,
but it's a thing for me. Like I'm a very DIY thing. I don't spend money for sponsoring like advertisements and all that shit. So anytime anyone shares it, I'm very appreciative of it. So since we're talking right now, thank you very much for that. To put it into a bigger platform that I don't have currently. And more importantly, like I said, taking the time, an hour and a half talking to me. You know, like I said, admired a lot of your output for many, almost 2 decades at this point. And for myself, and it's a thing where I just am very appreciative of the time. And like I said, you are someone that I hold in a very high regard for being very well-spoken, very smart, very worldly. So to kind of chop it up with you for an hour and a half was a really great time for me. And I very much just want to say thank you for your time, because it's the one thing we all have, and we don't get back once we use it. So it's not lost on me. So thank you very much. Is there anything you would like to plug online or anything that you want to plug in general?
No, but thank you, John, for the conversation. It was a lot of fun.
So that was my conversation with Dwid. I want to thank him once again for coming on the show. And honestly, I'm going to do something real quickly. I gave this person their props in real time right after I did this conversation, but is something that I feel like is a bigger kind of talking point I've been thinking about since doing this chat with Dwid. But huge thanks to Jesse Leach of Killswitch Engage. You know, we kind of talked about, and I've talked about over the years of how we find music and how it's important to have those people that share things with you, share their influences and all that kind of stuff, however random or odd they may be. And something I always remember is Jesse wearing Integrity shirts, championing that band in various interviews and so forth. When people would talk about, you know, who are some of his favorite bands growing up, or what are some hardcore bands that people should check out if you're into a certain era of, you know, the style of music and so forth. And he always championed that band. And that was honestly one of the things that got me into checking them out probably about 2 decades ago. And I sent him a message, and I basically was like, thank you so much for championing that band and exposing them to maybe an audience that wouldn't have gotten to know about them. And I'm in that audience. And, you know, through it, I found a great band. I found a band that steered me in a lot of ways to challenge maybe how I was thinking as a child, as a young youth, and even still now as a 40-year-old person. Sometimes I'll go back and listen to some of those earlier records and just think to myself, Stu was singing about this shit in the early 90s, and nothing, just like we said in the chat, nothing has changed, or things haven't changed that much. Wild to think about that. Like, it almost becomes that, like, I fucking told you so kind of mentality. But the other thing, too, in this that I find really interesting is just there was a moment in the conversation, and you can go back and hear me, or if you're watching the video, you could have seen it on my face, where when talking about how I grew up and kind of realizing, and this is a thought I've come to the conclusion of in the last probably 6 to 8 months, talking with some friends recently from back home, about the idea of, do people not learn certain things because it's a way to oppress a large section of people? Is it a way to misinform to a degree of like, well, this isn't as important? I guess now, as we call it, sort of, I guess, gaslighting or whatever. But I don't know. It's just interesting, like I said, to have grown up in an area where when you go to any of like the original 13 colonies and so forth, it's still so steeped in that culture and that history. And I know everywhere kind of has that in different spades. And if you go back to the episode I did with Lord Nelson, like I talked about how when you're in North Carolina and South Carolina, it feels like it still very much is holding on to its racist roots. Like it's fucking out there, and it's not being hidden. It's real fucking blatant. And it's real upsetting when you see that. And I think the thing now is I'm getting a little older and traveling a lot more and seeing kind of the world for what it is. It just makes me wonder, like, is a lot of the things, are we trying to like eradicate history? Are we trying to do all these things? And in light of, like, I mean, as I'm recording this, like the JFK files came out and a lot of other things are coming to light. And the thing that I keep kind of getting just like, is the withholding of information. And it's something that I feel like we should all be entitled to, but there's whomever, the powers that be, will determine what we are supposed to know, what we're allowed to know. And as I get older, I think that's sort of the thing that sucks about information, is I feel like we should all have access to it. And if there's something that you're trying to hide, then it just makes me question, like, what is it that you're hiding? Why can't we know it? And I feel like if we were to put it in a person-to-person perspective, if you're withholding information, then that either means you're trying to get power over somebody, it means that you're lying to them and you don't want to get caught, or a little bit of all of it, or maybe there's something in the middle, and I haven't figured that one out for myself yet. But it just seems wrong. And what's funny is I was hesitant to say any of that, and even some of this, because ultimately I don't really want to piss people off, and I don't want to hurt people's feelings or make them feel invalidated or anything like that. But I also keep coming to this conclusion that I need to be more authentically me, and I need to stop pussyfooting around other people's feelings necessarily. Like, you can have your opinions and I can have mine, and hopefully we can have a pretty general discourse, and maybe at the end of the day we just agree to disagree. And I think a great example of that is literally the conversation you just heard, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I agree 100% with everything that Dwid thinks, feels, and puts out there, but I do respect him as a person and for the experiences that he may have gone through, things he may have read, experienced, and all that kind of stuff that leads him to his own beliefs and his own thoughts. And we had a pretty civil conversation about a lot of heavy things. That is what I look for. I look for people who are able to do the same thing. So if something I said in this, or even going back to the Warbringer episode with John, if anything I said rubs you the wrong way or makes you not want to listen to the show or whatever, part of me is sorry for that. Sorry in the fact that maybe you thought I was something that I'm not, but also I would hope maybe that you would do what Dwid and I just did. Have a conversation. Some of you have actually sent me DMs and emails regarding things that maybe you don't agree with, and we've had a discourse, and I've learned some things from some of you, and hopefully you have done the same. I know I have with some other people on other topics, and hopefully that's all I want. I just want people to have real, honest conversations, because I feel like we just don't do that anymore. And we aren't challenged anymore, because all that ends up happening is everyone just wants to argue and beat you down till you see my point. I don't want to beat you down to see my point. I want you to maybe be challenged and just look at something from a perspective that isn't your own and isn't something you would have thought of. And then maybe go, oh, and then maybe challenge me back and go, well, what about X, Y, or Z? That's all I really want. That's why I enjoy doing this show so much and what I get out of it. Like I said, I've been thinking about this conversation for almost 2 weeks now, and that happens typically with every episode, and sometimes I do a couple a week. So imagine the things that I'm constantly thinking about in addition to my own interactions with other people and things that I'm taking in daily. I think it's the best part of getting older is still being 40 and wondering about a lot of things in my life and wondering how can I be better? What can I do to be better? And I think as of right now, it's to challenge myself and to be honest with myself and with others. All that said, let's start wrapping up this episode. It was a pretty heavy one. Obviously, I'm still kind of in that mode. But if you would like to keep up with Dwid, you can find him on Instagram at Dwid Hellion, as well as on Twitter at Hellion Dwid. I will forewarn you, on Twitter, it does not look like he's been active in a very long time. There was another one that the the last tweets I saw were from 2014, and it just said, ha 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 ha. Which I would imagine be done very menacingly. And then, like I said, the other one that is active that I just said, I don't think he's even made a post. So he's there, doesn't use it. If you like to keep him on Instagram, though, he definitely is using Instagram a hell of a lot more. And if you'd like to keep up with Integrity, you can find them on Facebook at Integrity HC, Instagram at Integrity Official, and Twitter at Integrity_HT. There's some links in the show notes for different link trees. There's one for Dwid, and then there's also one for Integrity. I will definitely say the one with Integrity then unlocks some other link trees for merch in different areas and so forth. They have done a very tremendous job of making sure that everything that you need to know about that band is taken care of. There's also integrity.bandcamp.com if you want to support the band and pick up different albums, CDs, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, Bandcamp Friday is a thing, so go throw some money their way. The band is actually, as I'm on a recording right now, they're playing in Chicago. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it because I have a show in Detroit, and I have another show on Tuesday in Chicago. So too many things of traveling, and I couldn't unfortunately make it. But hopefully we'll be able to see Integrity at some point in this year, as well as check out his other project, Psywarfare, as you heard him say at the very end. This is just one of those. Great episode. I can't believe it happened. And leading up to the 500th episode, it just feels so apropos that something like this happened and was, for me, as great as it was. All that said, if you want to follow us, you can do such at BrewSpeakPod on most of your social media platforms. Email me at brutallySpeaking@gmail.com. Rate, review, subscribe. You know why that's important. Please do it if you can. The show has been getting shared all over the place lately. It has been great. Continue to do that, please. And if you could, please continue to support Rockabilia for supporting this show. Head on over to rockabilia.com, pick up some swag. They just put out a Snot collab now that Snot's back and playing shows and doing festival dates and so forth. I tell you, this week in and week out, they do collabs with some of the best artists, the newest artists, classic artists, everything in between, doing all kinds of great merch. Currently, as I'm sitting here right now, because apparently in Michigan it decided it wanted to snow randomly after a 65-degree day the day before, I'm wearing a Caven hoodie that I picked up from Rockabilia. It is really awesome to kind of be able to find some out-of-print merch sometimes, in addition to the new stuff that's coming out. So head on over there. They have over 100,000 items in their online store. I'm sure there will be something that you would like from there. Use our code BREWtally at checkout. Take 10% off your total purchase order. Thank those guys and gals for supporting this show for as long as they have. And for the Brutally Speaking podcast, I am John, and I'll see you all next week where I have Justin of Broken Love on. That was a quick, fun chat. Looking forward to getting that one out to you. Enjoy the rest of your week.